Talking to the Taliban. Sky News meets the fighters gaining ground in Afghanistan as Allied forces pull out. The UK's former spy chief tells us this could be bad news.
This is a crucial highway which the Taliban have been trying to get control of. But the fact that the Taliban have got so close to the capital is showing them they're making gains.
Well, I think if terrorist groups are allowed to regenerate somewhere like Afghanistan, it will lead to more threat on the shores of our country and our allies.
Restoring people's freedoms. The Prime Minister to reveal plans on easing restrictions later, amidst concern from some scientists. Demolished. US officials take down the last section of the collapsed Miami apartment building, with more than 100 people still missing. A very big thank you from the very top. The Queen awards UK Health Services the George Cross as the NHS prepares to mark its 73rd birthday. And the Wimbledon wildcard wonder, the British teenage sensation Emma Raducanu, prepares for her last 16 match at Wimbledon.
Good morning. For many of us, it's sunshine and showers, but fewer showers in the south than over the weekend, and not as heavy either. Further north, though, still looking rather unsettled and could turn very windy later on from the southwest. More details through the morning.
Morning all. We begin with a rare glimpse inside the very heart of Taliban territory. Sky News is filmed with fighters in Afghanistan who are gaining weapons and ground as the US draws down its presence in the country. In the wake of the 9/11 attacks, thousands of international troops poured in to oust the Taliban government for harbouring the al-Qaeda leader Osama bin Laden. But nearly 20 years on, foreign troops have all but departed. The former head of MI6, Sir Alex Younger, has told us the threat to the UK from terror groups like al-Qaeda will grow if allies turn their back on the country. Well, Sky News has spent time with the Taliban in this exclusive report. The team travelled from Kabul to Syedabad, southwest of the capital, and then to an old US Army base at Sultan Kel, which has just been recently taken over by the Taliban. Our special correspondent Alex Crawford's report was filmed by Kevin Shepherd.
The Taliban are on the march and gaining territory at an astonishing rate. We've been invited to meet them inside their own base. They want to show us, as foreign journalists, how strong they are, and also how they're in no mood to compromise. The departure of the bulk of the American and other NATO forces has emboldened them, and they smell victory. One commander in Wardak province told me they would never work alongside the other groups in government.
As a real Afghan, we would never do that, because they are the people who are killing and kidnapping, who are thieves and who are corrupt, so we'll never work with them.
We're the first foreign journalists to see the latest army base the Taliban have captured in the province, and they want to show us the treasure trove of military riches they've seized with it. Many of these boxes supplied by the Americans hadn't even been opened before the Taliban got hold of them.
RPG.
Whoa. Can anyone believe that the Taliban wants peace when you've got all these weapons now?
Most of
the time we don't rely on all of this, we just rely on Allah. But it does help us a lot, and it's given us a lot of new weapons we can use in battle. Of course we want peace. All people want peace here, but the government doesn't want peace with us.
From this base alone, the Taliban say they seized about 900 guns, 30 Humvees and 20 army pickup trucks.
It's a whole pile of destroyed vehicles, military vehicles there, and a huge area that they've managed to take over. I think the Taliban will see this and view this as a substantial victory.
And it follows a nationwide pattern of Afghan soldiers putting up only a half-hearted fight. Many of the fighters we saw were carrying new weapons seized during the taking of the base. The white flag that signifies the Taliban takeover is flying in large swathes of the country right now, and they're creeping closer to the capital. Our journey en route to the Taliban was halted.
This is a crucial highway which the Taliban have been trying to get control of.
The Afghan army brought in reinforcements to push them back.
But the fact that the Taliban have got so close to the capital is showing them they're making gains.
The Taliban are winning the propaganda war, able to plant and detonate roadside bombs with few reassurances from the government about how they're going to regain control. Instead, in Taliban-controlled areas, they blame the Afghan National Army for injuries and insecurity. We saw no women at all out in public, although the Taliban insist they've progressed and want their girls educated.
Do you all welcome the Taliban being here? Tell me why.
Because it's so much safer now. The Taliban have brought us security and peace, he says. The Taliban paint themselves as deeply religious and say they're fighting for an Islamic emirate based on a strict interpretation of Sharia law. Like so many others, this former prisoner jailed by the Americans immediately rejoined the fight on his release.
The only thing that will persuade me to put down my gun is if there's Islamic law here, based entirely on Islam, and the government is run according to Islamic rules.
The Taliban resurgence appears to have real momentum, and that's worrying for the Afghan government and its international allies, who are now watching all the military hardware they handed over ending up in the hands of the group they're meant to be used against. The government is seen as weak and deeply unpopular in areas, particularly where the Taliban have managed to take a hold.
Can you work with any of them?
They are nothing, anything. They are nothing. And this, we will destroy them. We are going to destroy our country. They come, they bring bad situation for Afghanistan, for our people, for our civil lives, for our country, for our schools, for our hospitals, everything. They're destroyed.
And this while peace talks are meant to be ongoing. And all the while, the Taliban seem to be growing stronger, and that will surely lessen their desire to do any deals. Alex Crawford, Sky News in Wardak province.
And we're joined once again on the programme by the Care Minister, Helen Whately. Ms Whately, good to see you. I do hope you're well. And we will, of course, move straight on to your brief in just a second. But just on Afghanistan, because this is a day of some significance, several hundred British lives have been lost. Given the chaos that Afghanistan is experiencing in some parts, was it worth it?
Well, our involvement in Afghanistan and the involvement of our military has reduced the threat to us from al-Qaeda. While we're withdrawing from the military engagement, we will continue to be supporting Afghanistan. And what we want to see is a peaceful and stable future for the people of Afghanistan. That's what they deserve.
Now, to your brief, of course, a very big day. We're expecting a significant announcement from the Prime Minister just a little bit later on, which I am certain that you will not wish to preempt. But just in terms of the roadmap to July the 19th, is there anything in the data, as things stand, that would make that date anything other than set in stone?
So, as you mentioned there, later today, the Prime Minister and the Health Secretary are going to be setting out our plans for the next stage of the roadmap, where we're on track to take that final fourth stage of the roadmap on July the 19th, giving people back far more of their freedoms, much more back to normal. And this is thanks to both the sacrifices that people have made, but the huge success of the vaccination programme. And what we're seeing there is where the vaccination programme has really weakened the link between people catching COVID and ending up in hospital and then, very sadly, the risk of dying. What we're seeing is the vaccination really making a difference there. So that's why the Prime Minister will be able to set out these plans with the Health Secretary later today.
It certainly has made a difference, a huge difference. But when reading the words of the Health Secretary at the weekend, the new Health Secretary, your new boss, Sajid Javid, suggesting that we will see a significant rise in infections when we reopen, if it's on July the 19th or on another date. To what extent are you expecting a rise in infections? Can you put a number on it? The ONS thinks we're about 1 in 260 people with COVID in England at the moment. Where will it go after July the 19th?
That's absolutely true. I don't have a number for you, but what we do anticipate is we will continue to see infections rise as we open up more, as people are going about life more like normal. But the important thing here is every day more people getting vaccinated. We're already in a position where 86% of adults have had their first dose, 63% have had their second dose. We expect by the 19th of July that'll be over 2/3 of the adult population having had their second dose. So that's far more protection from COVID. And the message to anyone watching this is if you're an adult, if you're over 18 and you haven't had your first jab yet, go and get it. If you're eligible for your second jab, go and get that too. Get the protection that you can have.
What then is your message to people this morning as regards the wearing of masks after July the 19th? I mean, will you be wearing one?
So further details are going to be set out by the Prime Minister and the Health Secretary on that later today. Of course, I, like others, will plan to follow the guidance on when you should or shouldn't wear them. We're going to be asking people much more to take personal responsibility for choices like that. I know, like many others, I can't wait to not have to wear a mask, but I will be cautious and try and make the right judgments and follow guidance on this.
Sure, but on what basis should people make that decision? I mean, what are the common sense places in which you will find yourself continuing to wear a mask? We obviously know that there are other Cabinet colleagues, Robert Jenrick speaking at the weekend, suggesting that they won't be wearing one.
Well, I think others were saying, like I'm saying, that we're looking forward to not having to wear one in so many circumstances. But one of the things that we will be setting out later today, the Health Secretary and the Prime Minister, is the findings of the social distancing review, looking at things like mask wearing and the 1 metre plus distance from people. I can't preempt the detail of what's going to be said later today, but overall what I can say is we're going to be shifting much more to an approach which is where there's guidance, but you take a personal responsibility, make a common sense judgment about what is the right thing to do to protect yourself and others.
I'm just trying to dig, though, down into the idea of making common sense judgments on all of this. I mean, public transport, for example. The Mayor of Greater Manchester, Andy Burnham, has pointed out the fact that, there are vulnerable people who need to take public transport to get to work. They don't have a choice about how they get to work. The people who sit next to them will have a choice as to whether or not to wear a mask. Should they be wearing a mask on a bus?
Well, as I said, I can't preempt what's going to be set out later today, but a really important point here is that particularly those who are at the highest risk from COVID have had the opportunity to get vaccinated. We're in the earlier cohorts invited to be vaccinated, so have not only had the first dose, but also the second dose. So have got a high level of protection from the vaccination. We're seeing that with both Pfizer and AstraZeneca, the protection from hospitalisation is over 90%. So that's really strong protection from being vaccinated. That's the best thing for those people who are at higher risk.
Sure, but again, I'm not asking you to preempt the decision. I'm just asking for just some examples of where one might, display common sense and wear the mask. I mean, just very specifically, in terms of visiting care homes, in terms of visiting hospitals, if everything opens up on July the 19th, should we expect those to open up in the way it was pre-COVID-19?
Well, with care homes, clearly there's a particular risk to residents in care homes who we know have been much more vulnerable to COVID. What we've done over the last few months, as that group of people have been right at the forefront of the vaccination effort, is already open up and, in fact, reduced some of the restrictions on visiting again, even on the 21st of June. We will be taking some more steps as part of step 4 of the roadmap. I don't think visiting will completely go back to normal. There will still have to be some precautions, but it's step by step, getting things as close to normal as we can, while still protecting people who are at greater risk from COVID.
Just in terms, though, of a couple of the measures that have helped people through, what have been a tremendously difficult year and a half for all of us, let's be absolutely honest about it. The extension to universal credit, I mean, it does sound like there are divergent voices within the Cabinet on this. I mean, would you be minded to see that uplift continue just a little bit longer, as people like Ian Duncan Smith have suggested?
Well, I don't think I can go into the detail of that, but I mean, what we do know is that we have some difficult times ahead, that this has been a huge hit to our economy, and also that we have extra costs. So, for instance, I know very well for the NHS that we're providing an extra £7 billion of funding to help the NHS through this year, including helping the NHS reduce the backlog of people waiting for treatment. But we have both some real cost pressures and also some challenges for the economy, which we're going to have to get through.
How did it make you feel when you heard of the news of your former colleague at the Department for Health, Matt Hancock, that he had broken the rules that he had introduced?
I think it was a difficult moment for me to see that, like for many others. And also, what struck me was that, the huge sacrifices that many people have made during the pandemic, all the things that have been missed, whether it's children missing out on education, whether it's grandparents not getting to see their grandchild, all the time that hasn't been spent by people together. What Matt Hancock did was completely wrong, and he did the right thing by resigning.
Did you feel angry about it? Because all those people that you've just listed had genuine reason to feel angry.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a very difficult moment when you have worked with somebody through the pandemic, as the health team has worked through that over the last 18 months. But no, he has resigned because he recognises he did the wrong thing. And my job is to focus on looking ahead in supporting the NHS workforce and also social care through the months ahead. And of course, we have social care reform to get on with as well. So there's a lot to do looking ahead, and that's what I'm focused on.
Helen Whately, as I said before, good to see you again. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Plenty more still to come on the show this morning. US officials have demolished the rest of that Miami apartment building that collapsed 11 days ago, around about 12:30. We're going to be speaking to someone whose friends are still missing. At 8:20, we'll be getting the views of Surge and NERVTAG member Professor Callum Semple as the Prime Minister prepares to give more details about the end of lockdown measures in England.
I'm going to Kansas City. Kansas City, here I come.
And at 9:45, I'll be speaking to the teen blues singer Toby Lee, 16. Time for a look at the morning's other main stories. And as mentioned, officials have demolished the remaining section of the collapsed Miami apartment building in a controlled detonation. The explosion was carried out in part due to concerns of high winds from Tropical Storm Elsa. Rescue workers are awaiting the all-clear to resume their search for the 100-plus people still missing since the collapse 11 days ago. The mayor of Miami-Dade County said she was relieved.
Honestly, this precise moment, I feel relief. I feel relief because this building was unstable. The building was hampering our search efforts. I've heard them say that they think there are voids in this area, areas where they'll be able to search.
Let's take a look at the latest coronavirus data for the UK. There were 24,248 new cases reported in the most recent 24-hour period. 50 more deaths have also been reported, meaning the total number of people who've died within 28 days of a positive test now stands at 128,222. The latest vaccination figures show another 137,389 received their first jab, 196,209 received their second. In total, 33.6 million people have now received both doses of a COVID vaccine. Lockdown restrictions in Northern Ireland are easing today, with up to 6 people from 5 households permitted to meet in a private setting. The number of people allowed to gather outdoors is also increasing to 500. Restrictions also being eased in the Republic of Ireland today. The limit on the number of people who can visit each other if they're fully vaccinated or have recovered from COVID-19 in the last 9 months has been removed. Pre-planned weddings with a maximum of 50 people are also permitted. Cities around the UK and Stonehenge have been lit up to celebrate the National Health Service's 73rd year. To mark the occasion, the Queen has awarded the George Cross, recognising the efforts of health workers. It is only the 3rd time the award has been gifted to a collective group. And we'll be speaking to the National Medical Director of NHS England, Dr Stephen Powis, at, as you can see on your screen, past. Firefighters in Cyprus are struggling to contain what's being described as the most destructive wildfires in the island's history. Search crews recovered 4 bodies outside the village of Odu on the southern edge of the Troodos mountain range. The President of the European Council has now promised to provide every kind of assistance to help people through the crisis. Now, thousands of England fans will be hoping to secure tickets to what could prove to be a historic semi-final after the 3 Lions defeated Ukraine in Rome on Saturday. But what's all this about? Well, as you can see, the team playing around in a swimming pool with some inflatables that you might just recognise from, well, 2018, the World Cup back then, relaxing after what's been a meteoric rise through the competition. They are, of course, taking on Denmark for a shot at the finals on Wednesday. The lifeguards must be having an absolute canary. Now, time for a quick look through the front pages. Let's start with The Sun. It links the goodwill towards the England football team with the happiness that many people are likely to feel at the loosening of restrictions. The government prepares to make anti-COVID measures like mask wearing and social distancing a matter of personal responsibility rather than law. The Mail proclaiming freedom is in your hands now. According to The Guardian, the government is facing a backlash from some of its scientific advisors who disagree with the change in policy. Meanwhile, the FT has word that China's internet regulator has banned the taxi app Didi for allegedly violating rules on personal data collection. Now let's return now to our top story, the withdrawal of troops from Afghanistan. The former head of MI6, Sir Alex Younger, has told Sky News that groups like IS and Al-Qaeda have the capacity to regenerate in the country, which, in turn, could lead to an increased threat to the UK. As you can see, he was speaking to our Foreign Affairs editor, Deborah Haynes, who joins us in the studio. Good to see you this morning, Deborah. I suppose, in a sense, if you've been following what is happening on the ground in Afghanistan at the moment, these comments from Sir Alex are not necessarily entirely surprising.
No, and also if you've been following what's been going on in Afghanistan, you might be surprised that despite the fact that we haven't had any official words from the British government, the majority of British troops have actually already left the country along with the rest of NATO forces. And the reason they went in the first place was after the 9/11 attacks in 2001 on the United States to disrupt that terrorist threat. And the warning is now that if they leave, that threat will return. And that's exactly what the former head of MI6 said. And I think we can hear his words.
The reality is that there are groups there. We've been very successful in disrupting both Daesh and Al-Qaeda. They're on the back foot, but it would be wrong patently to claim that they have gone away. And they have the capacity to regenerate. If terrorist groups are allowed to regenerate somewhere like Afghanistan, it will lead to more threat on the shores of our country and our allies.
And his core message was that at the end of the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, when they drew out in 1989, the West, he said, turned their back on that country, and that led to the ability of Al-Qaeda to operate there in the first place. And he said it would be an enormous mistake if the West did that again. A really significant warning from someone who's spent the last 20 years at the heart of this fight against terrorism.
Deborah, much more from you throughout the day, I'm sure. For now, thanks very much indeed. There will be in-depth coverage on the states of the country America is leaving behind throughout the day today, including a special programme with Mark Austin at 7 p.m. That is Afghanistan Endgame today, a little later on Sky News. Now, it is a big day at Wimbledon for the British teenager. Emma Raducanu, our sports presenter, Jackie Beltrow, joins us from the glass box. Jackie, good to see you this morning. It's a fantastic story, this one.
Oh, it is. She's arrived just at the right time. You know, everyone was thinking, oh, Murray's out and he's maybe coming to the end of his career. And suddenly this star arrives from absolutely nowhere. Well, not quite nowhere, because she has been on the LTA, the Lawn Tennis Association's radar, and been supported by them for many years since she was very small. My son used to play tennis, and whenever they would go to a tournament when they were 9, if anyone drew Emma Raducanu, it was a bit like, oh, bad luck, you're not going to win that one. She's always whacked the ball so very hard and has always had that great sort of competitive spirit. Nothing seems to worry her. Even when she was down in her previous matches or had a little bit of a wobble, she regrouped, and she just showed a lot of experience that she doesn't actually have, and that is very telling of a new player. If they can deal with the pressure, deal with the crowd, deal with all of it, and it doesn't upset their game, that is a very good omen. I have been chatting to some of Britain's top coaches at the weekend, and even they are surprised at how well it's gone for her. It is the stuff that dreams are made of, making it to the last 16 of Wimbledon on your debut and as a wild card. At 338 in the world, Emma Raducanu is by far the lowest ranked player in the draw and the youngest British woman to reach the 4th round of the championships in the Open era. Everyone in the sport is impressed.
It's massive. You know, having players like Emma, it's so exciting. It's exciting for tennis, of course, it's exciting for British tennis. She's going to grab a new audience, and just the way she's been on the court, you know, she expresses herself, she gets the crowd involved, she's getting fired up, and of course, the actual quality of tennis is there for everyone to see.
This might seem like an overnight success story, but it isn't. Emma has been on the LTA's high-performance programme since she was a youngster. She's coached by Andy Murray's father-in-law, Nigel Sears, and managed by Maria Sharapova's agent. But no one expected her to be this comfortable at the top table of world tennis just weeks after finishing her A-levels and turning professional.
Her performance on the weekend was so impressive for that reason. You have to remember, Emma was playing her first Wimbledon. She only played her first WTA Tour event 3 weeks ago. So for her to go out and handle that pressure was hugely impressive.
She's handled a spotlight as if she was born to it. There's a real buzz around here about her next match. It's against the world number 75, Australia's Alia Tomljanovic, and it is winnable. As she was leaving to join the player bubble a couple of weeks ago, her parents suggested she was packing too many match outfits. As it turns out, she didn't pack enough. Well, hopefully she found a laundry, and even if she loses this next match, she's going to pick up £181,000, which is 3 times the amount of money that she's earned in her career so far. But for her, it won't be about that. It'll be about the experience and learning. And of course, she'll be back on that tour because her ranking's pretty low into some very far-flung places in very low-level tournaments. After this, it will be back down to reality with a bump. Also today, Roger Federer going so well at Wimbledon, much better than expected after a knee injury. And of course, Novak Djokovic, who has looked unbeatable.
Thanks very much, Emma. What a prospect for the future. Time to see how the weather is looking. Here's Kirsty.
Look forward to brighter skies. The weather. Sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Good morning. We have got some interesting weather to talk about for the start of the week. It is going to settle down later in the week, but tonight we've got wet and windy weather moving in from the southwest, and today, for many, it's a pretty showery picture, especially across central and northern parts of the UK. So Northern England, Scotland and Northern Ireland, we've got some heavy showers to watch out for. Further south, we've got some brighter skies. There will be some showers around, but not quite as heavy as the weekend, you'll be glad to hear. So maybe a greater chance of seeing something a little bit drier and brighter. Temperatures from high teens into the low 20s, so pleasant enough in the sunshine. The showers, though, keep going further north, even where the skies brighten up. So it could be, again, some really heavy downpours to watch out for. There's some really heavy thunderstorms yesterday in the Edinburgh area. In the south, the calm before the storm. In comes a low-pressure system as we move through the evening. Now, it's going to be quite unseasonably windy for the time of year as we go through the night tonight. Risk of gales along English Channel coast and rain spreading its way northwards through the night.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Kirsty, thanks very much indeed. Let's return, though, to one of the big stories of the day, one which will develop through the day, in fact. Boris Johnson will be revealing later how he plans to restore people's freedoms in England in the final stage of his roadmap out of lockdown. Here's Helen Whately.
Of course, I, like others, will plan to follow the guidance on when you should or shouldn't wear them. We're going to be asking people much more to take personal responsibility for choices like that. I know, like many others, I can't wait to not have to wear a mask, but I will be cautious and try and make the right judgments and follow guidance on this.
Well, I also asked the Care Minister what the next stage of opening up might mean for care homes and care home visits.
Clearly, there's a particular risk to residents in care homes who we know have been much more vulnerable to COVID. What we've done over the last few months, as that group of people have been right at the forefront of the vaccination effort, is already open up and, in fact, reduced some of the restrictions on visiting again, even on the 21st of June. We will be taking some more steps as part of step 4 of the roadmap. I don't think visiting will completely go back to normal. There will still have to be some precautions, but it's step by step, getting things as close to normal as we can, while still protecting people who are at greater risk from COVID.
Our political correspondent, Tamara Cohen, joins me in the studio. Morning, TC. What did we learn from the Care Minister this morning?
Well, I think the main thing was she effectively confirmed that Freedom Day in England is happening. We'd had all the indications, but the government aren't supposed to be officially confirming it until next Monday, that the 19th of July will go ahead. But she said it's happening, and that will mean, as you put to her, masks no longer mandatory. You no longer have to check in with your QR code every time you go to a bar or restaurant. And we'll also be getting the results of that review on social distancing. So we're expecting the government to say that 1 metre plus rule, which has made it very difficult to have full capacity in offices and restaurants and other venues, will be swept away as well. So a lot of going back to normal will be happening on the 19th. But questions, I'm sure, for Boris Johnson about why he and his health secretary have said we need to live with it like we do with flu. I think we know what they're getting at in terms of you vaccinate people, and of course we are going to get cases and we are going to get some deaths, but we're going to try and keep that as low as possible. But scientists are saying this isn't really like flu. What's the data on how many cases is acceptable? And where we will not go fully back to normal is care home visits and hospital visits. And also, I'm not expecting the government to say, look, everyone back to the office tomorrow morning. I think to some extent they will leave it up to employers to decide how fast they want to go.
Tamara, thanks very much indeed. Now, the partially collapsed apartment building in Miami has now been demolished due to concerns over Storm Elsa. 24 people have died and a further 121 are missing from the disaster 11 days ago. Arnie and Miriam Notkin, residents of Champlain Towers, have still not been found, despite the efforts of one of Arnie's former students. I'm pleased to say that Sonia Diaz joins us on the programme. Sonia, really appreciate you taking the time to be with us this morning. Thanks very much for being with us. I just wonder if you might start
Thank you for having me.
No, not a problem. I just wonder if you might start by telling us just a little bit about Arnie and Miriam.
Well, I met Arnie when I was in elementary school. It was back in 1974. He was our elementary school physical education teacher. He was a fun guy to be with. Everybody loved him. The kids were always hanging out with him. If they wanted to stay after school, Arnie was there. And so it was like he created this bond with all the kids. And eventually, over the years, I stayed there in elementary school till 1976. And then I moved on to middle school, high school, graduated, went on. And then I started working for the school system. where he and I worked together. He worked part-time by then, and he worked with me also at the Miami Beach Police Athletic League. And it was, we had many years of friendship and just pretty much a nice guy to be with, to hang out with, to talk to. And, you know, as years went on, we kind of took our ways, and I had to move away from Florida, and I'd go back down there and I talked to him. I just talked to him maybe about a year and a half ago when I was down there last. So the fact that he's not been recovered from the rubble, which is, you know, at this point, I know that it's a done deal, but it's just heartbreaking to know that something like this could happen, and they haven't recovered his body or his wife's body.
I'm sorry to hear you speak in those terms about the recovery rather than the rescue, but with the controlled detonation of another part of the building, there does look like there is very little hope left for the 100+ people still missing.
Yeah. I believe now there's about 126 missing, and this evening at 10:30 this evening local time, they finally demolished the rest of the controlled demolished, but yet sad that they did that, and folks are concerned about the fact that they still haven't found a lot of people, and you know, it's hard to say whether they were away, whether they were here, but at this point, I just tend to believe that it's done and over with.
As you say, I mean, you know the area very well, you know the couple very well. Looking at what has happened in terms of the rescue efforts over the past few days, that the length of time that it has taken, you know, search and rescue to get in there, I mean, how has that made you and others with strong connections to the area, how has that made you feel?
It's sad. I honestly, it's like a gut punch. I've talked to a lot of former classmates that are basically feeling the same way. I mean, this happened the night before my birthday, and I'll tell you, it was just the saddest thing to hear, wake up on my birthday morning to hear that this happened, and so many lives have been lost. I mean, I'm sad about my friends, but I'm sad about everybody that's you know, and even the pets. I mean, I'm just heartbroken. There's just no other way to call it. It's just heartbreaking.
Well, if it is any consolation, I suspect it will not be. This is a story that has been reported in every corner of the world. There have been billions of eyes on what has happened there. I think plenty of people feel a connection to an apartment block like that coming down with what some would say was absolutely no notice.
Absolutely not. 1:30 in the morning, everybody's asleep in their beds, and just the first day when I saw the news and I saw that side of the building is all gone, and you see kids' beds, you see just bedrooms, and it's just, yeah, that's the collapse of the rest of the building today. So yeah, that's a little gut-wrenching.
I want to finish, if we can, Sonia. Just once again, I'll see if my director can show us the pictures of Arnie and Miriam again, because I think in every single one of those pictures, the pair of them have the broadest smile that you could ever possibly see. It strikes me that there was an awful lot of joy in their lives.
That's all you ever saw was them, and the one on the balcony that I believe that was the last May, this past May, that they celebrated his birthday, or the balcony one, I believe, was in COVID last year. And yeah, that was a smiling group. They were always smiling.
Well, Sonia, we will keep fingers crossed that there may well be some miracle for some people as regards the situation in Florida. But to you,
I can only hope, yeah.
Indeed. So thanks very much for taking the time to talk to us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Now, the UK must cut its global environmental footprint by 75% by 2030, according to a new report by the World Wildlife Fund, the WWF. Joining us now, Mark Wright, Director of Science at the Worldwide Fund for Nature. Mark, great to have you on the programme this morning. Explain exactly what this means for the UK. If we suggest that we need to see our environmental footprint cut by 75%, what sort of world will we be living in?
OK, well, let's remember why we're asking for this in the first place. And it's quite clear that all the things we buy, the food we eat, are fueling the loss of nature and also increasing the risk of climate change. So clearly something has to be done. And so we're calling for a three-quarter slashing of our footprint. Let's remember, this is just what's happening in the UK. It's also kind of factors in the things we import from overseas as well, the food we bring from overseas, the clothes, the cars, and so on. But what the report also says is basically speaking, there's a lot of flexibility in the system. We can make those changes, those really substantial changes, without massively impacting our lives. So don't forget, the government has already committed to a 78% reduction in greenhouse gases. So these things are perfectly doable. And actually, the economy could benefit as a result as well.
Give us some examples of those, Mark, because frankly, it will be music to everyone's ears if we can make those type of gains in terms of our environmental impact without there being a corresponding and equally significant effect on, well, frankly, let's be selfish about it, our own lives.
OK, well, let's use food, because we know that food is a real driver for losses around the world. So in this country, it might be a surprise to hear that we waste about 10 million tonnes of food and drink every single year, 10 million tonnes. So just think about what it costs to produce that in terms of time, resources, processing, transport, and so on. So it's horrifying that we waste 10 million tonnes, but 70% of that is perfectly edible. So if we could kind of rework the system so that we're not kind of throwing this stuff away. And of course, that 30% that is non-edible for us is edible for plenty of other things, for example, insects. And there are really good systems up and running already that take food waste, feed it to insects, and then we feed those insects to chickens rather than giving them soy, which came from Latin America, and it was produced by cutting down rainforest and clearing grasslands and so on. So there's a real win-win situations there.
What are the consequences? What are the potential consequences that would follow from us not being so ambitious in our targets to reduce our environmental impact?
Well, I think the images you're showing here show us the impacts. And in these last couple of years, we've seen just extraordinary outbursts of fires around the world. The horrible fires we're seeing in British Columbia at the moment. Cyprus I saw yesterday, but Siberia, Amazon, Australia, we're seeing these extreme weather events. Those will become the norm, sadly. And we know that we're losing species around the world as well. And don't forget, since 1900, 500 types of vertebrates have gone extinct. So these are animals no one will ever see again. And those risks will increase as if we don't take action now.
Mark Wright, good to see you this morning. Thanks very much for being with us.
Pleasure.
Well, let's return now to our special coverage of the Allied drawdown of troops from Afghanistan. US troops have almost completed their pullout after a conflict that has cost them and, of course, the Afghan people dearly. Afghan civilians have suffered huge loss of life. More than 47,000 have been killed since 2001. While the Afghan government keeps the army's death toll secret to avoid damaging morale, estimates show that between 66 and 69,000 Afghan soldiers have also been killed. More than 2,400 US soldiers, 455 UK soldiers and military personnel have been killed in action. And the war has now cost an approximate $2.261 trillion. Well, a recent study said that British soldiers were twice as likely to be killed as US troops, mainly because they were patrolling in the highly dangerous Helmand province. James Matthews reports now on how lives were changed forever by one terrifying incident.
Leaving Afghanistan doesn't mean Afghanistan leaves them. Soldiers who served, like Stuart Pearson,
Not really.
and families who waited back home, like Bob and Jem Wright, the parents of Mark.
I used to say, well, but if you go out and there's any trouble, hide behind the biggest tree. He went, I'm in Afghanistan, Mum. There's no any big trees.
We've got a man down! Mark and Stuart's horrific story has been graphically depicted on the big screen.
Moving impossible due to location being minefield.
With colleagues, the two friends became trapped in a minefield after going in to help a fellow soldier who'd stood on a mine. Of 4 explosions, the second took off Stuart's left leg.
I took my foot off a rock, my left foot, and put it on the ground, and that's when I heard the explosion. I get blown up slightly and twisted round.
The soldiers had called for a helicopter with a winch, to lift out casualties in relative safety, but they were told none was available. The downdraft from a landing Chinook set off another mine.
Unfortunately, Mark, who was straddling over me, protecting me from the downblast of the helicopter, he got blasted by that, injuries to his face, neck and upper body.
Mark Wright survived the first explosion that caught him. He was badly injured, but continued to communicate on the radio and with critically injured colleagues.
I remember just lying there thinking, I don't know if I can hold on for another hour here. But Mark wasn't. I was wanting to fall asleep, but Mark wouldn't let anyone fall asleep. He was shouting at us.
After 4 hours, US Black Hawk helicopters arrived at the site near Afghanistan's Kajaki Dam and winched the casualties to safety. 4 mines had injured 8 soldiers. Mark Wright was hit twice.
As Mark was getting winched up by the Black Hawks, he then shouted down, "Tell Jolene and my family that I love them."
Every night when he was wee before he went to sleep, I always said, "I love you." I always thought if I'm dead in the morning, that was the last words I heard. And I mean, when he used to phone, he always says, "Bye, I love you."
I thought, oh God, thank Christ that's over. Then I looked beside me and Mark was lying there, and I looked again and paramedics were rolling on top of him, giving him CPR. And then I looked again at him and he was gone.
Just took the breath away. I just thought, that's our life over.
At the inquest into Mark Wright's death, the coroner called him an exceptional soldier whose death was down to a series of failures. A lack of appropriate UK helicopters with a winch, the downdraft from the Chinook, and the delay in sending an appropriate helicopter.
I'd say a lot of these decisions are just made by people who sit in Whitehall that have never fought a battle at all, taken one day and fought an enemy. So quite disgusted by it. Yeah.
Why did they go there in the first place? Everywhere they go, they never seem to finish a job, and that's them pulling out. What about these lives that were lost? It's sad.
James Matthews, Sky News, Dalkeith.
Well, in recent weeks, negotiators from the Afghan government and the Taliban have been meeting in Qatar's capital, Doha, to discuss the peace process after talks had previously stalled earlier in the year. Joining us now is Fawzia Koofi, a member of the Afghan government's peace negotiating team, who was also the country's first female Deputy Speaker of Parliament. Ms Koofi, great to have you on the programme this morning. Really appreciate you taking the time. As we see Western troops removing themselves almost entirely from Afghanistan, what state do they leave your country in?
While we do appreciate, and there is a huge sympathy and compliments to the long-term partnership we have had with international community on this joint threat, the common threat, what was the international military extremism, that the people of Afghanistan, of course, were in the forefront with the international community. I guess it's more or less the same situation when they came to Afghanistan 20 years back in terms of, many indicators, many benchmarks. If you look, it's almost the same. Yes, things have changed. We have a government, institutions are there. There is security institutions, many progress on women's rights, etc. But if you look at the whole situation in terms of, still the risks for military extremism is there. The risk of institution, once again, being the victim of collapsing is there. The risk for, losing some of these gains are there.
As you say, I mean, things look from a certain angle to not have changed particularly. The last time I was in Afghanistan reporting from Afghanistan was 10 years ago. And back then we were talking about training up the Afghan National Army, training up the ANSF so that Afghans could police their own country. You look at what is happening in various parts of Afghanistan at the moment, and it would appear that the government does not have that capacity.
With the rapid change that is now you see happen in Afghanistan, at least in some part of the country, I don't think this is because the Taliban or the other military extremists are strong. I think much of the situation, the responsibility goes to the fact that, we have not been able to really demonstrate a strong leadership in terms of holding the country together. The army, as it was expected to be well-trained, well-equipped, along with other security institutions, we see that they are not really taking up their responsibility in many parts of the country. They actually leave the area without any threat, without any serious risk being faced to them. So, yes, I think that the problem was that in many villages, the international troops actually fought on behalf of these security forces, and that left that sense of responsibility, away from the shoulders of the security institutions and the leadership. Many internal factors contribute to the fact that where we are now, and I think things would have been much better if the leadership could take more responsibility, if corruption was, for instance, tackled in a way that, the security foot soldiers could benefit from the aid. These different elements put hands together and where we are now. And I must say also the role and the significance of the propaganda. The propaganda, for instance, there was a report which indicated that the Afghan government will collapse in 6 months. That, of course, automatically demoralize not only the security but also the people.
What then of events taking place where you are, the efforts to secure some kind of negotiated peace with the Taliban? How much hope do you place in that, given that which you've just been discussing?
Well, I'm still hopeful that there will be only one solution, and that is a negotiated settlement. I believe that even if either side try to gain more territory and try to control more places via a military strategy, that is not going to be sustainable. They're not going to sustain it. How, for instance, if Taliban try to control more territory, how are they going to finance and govern there? So that's going to be extremely difficult. And even if they try to, by whatever means, control the cities, bigger cities, of course, the governance will be a major issue, and there will be a military, resistance against them from different local communities. Probably not very organized, and that is the concern. But eventually, they will be organized. Let's remember that 20 years back when, after the Bonn conference, the new government was established, nobody actually even talked about Taliban. Taliban was completely dead. But after the Iraq war, Taliban re-emerged because the attention was focused to Iraq. And Taliban re-emerged 4 years later. So even if one side tried to win militarily, that is not going to end the war. So therefore, I think the only hope is this political settlement. We are moving not very in a fast pace, unfortunately, because of course, Taliban and both sides, now talk war more than peace.
Sure.
We are hoping that in the next few months, that before kind of the deadline for withdrawal, we will be able to reach some kind of political agreement.
Well, we wish you all the very best of luck with those efforts. Fawzia Koofi, great to see you this morning. Thanks for being with us. Time for us to see how the weather's looking this week. Here's Kirsty.
Look forward to brighter skies. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Good morning. The weather staying fairly unsettled for the start of the week, but things will calm down towards the weekend. Just in time for my birthday, of course, but in the meantime, looking rather unseasonably wet and windy tonight. We have got some drier, brighter spells across southern parts of England and Wales and Ireland to start the day. Further north, though, still quite cloudy with showery rain for northern England, Northern Ireland and Scotland. Could be some heavy rain still for a time across northern areas, so some heavy showers and even a few rumbles of thunder in the north. Fewer showers, certainly compared to the weekend, and a bit more sunshine in the south. Temperatures up to 22 degrees, but tonight we've got wet and windy weather moving up from the southwest.